The sun was hot above the desert city. The air smelled like sweat, dust, and fear. In the middle of the open square stood a platform made of cracked metal and old wood. Around it, aliens from different species shouted and waved credits. The slave? Auction had begun. On the platform, chained and trembling, knelt a girl. Her body was thin, her skin marked with bruises and strange ink. Her clothes were only enough to cover her, and even that looked worn out. She was not treated like a person, just a thing, a product to sell. Around her neck was a tag, personal pleasure unit, low maintenance. She kept her eyes down. Afraid to meet the gaze of the buyers, she had learned that looking up brought pain. That's how it always was, the whips, the collars, the cold metal rooms. The girl didn't even remember her real name anymore. Just pain, commands, and silence. A tall alien merchant with 6 eyes stepped forward and raised his hands. "This one's cheap." He shouted to the crowd. No special tricks, just obedient and broken, ready for service. "Who's first?" The crowd laughed. Some shouted cruel things. Others threw small bids. No one wanted to pay too much for a slave that looked so used. Some preferred the fresh ones, the loud ones, the wild ones, but this one was quiet. Too quiet then. From the edge of the crowd, a man stepped forward. He was human. Not many humans were seen in this part of the galaxy anymore. Not after the war. He looked poor. His clothes were dusty, patched many times. His boots were falling apart. A rough bag hung from his shoulder, and a long scar ran down his neck, but his eyes were sharp, focused. He walked slowly through the crowd, and people moved aside, confused. What was this poor human doing here? Surely he wasn't going to buy a slave. But he kept walking until he reached the edge of the platform. The girl finally looked up. Her heart jumped. There was no hunger in his eyes, no lust, just stillness, like he wasn't looking at her body, but at something deeper, something forgotten. How much for her? The man asked quietly. The merchant laughed. You? You can't afford her, even broken. She's worth more than what's in your pockets. Go back to your hole, human. The man reached into his bag and pulled out a single credit disc. It glowed weakly, an old model, dirty and faded, but it was real. "This is all I have," he said, placing it on the merchant's table. The crowd laughed again, louder this time. A single coin. "For her," someone shouted. The merchant scoffed. "She's barely worth that anyway. Take her. I'll get more use from the show than the sale." The chain holding the girl's collar clicked and fell loose. Her eyes widened as she looked at Prisette. The human again? She didn't move. She didn't trust this. No one ever paid for her without wanting something terrible. But the man just turned and said softly, "Come, you're free now." She didn't understand. Was it a trick? Another cruel joke? But her legs moved on their own, shaking, sore, scared. She followed him, barefoot through the sand. Her hands still held together by thin chains, but no one pulled her now. As they walked away, the crowd went quiet. No one cheered, no one followed. They just watched, confused, curious, maybe even a little afraid. The girl looked up at the man again, trying to understand who he was, why he did it. But he didn't say anything more, just kept walking toward the edge of the city, toward the unknown. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt something strange inside her chest. Not fear, not pain, but something small, soft and warm, like hope. The desert winds blew softly as they walked away from the slave market. The girl's feet stumbled over loose stones, but the man didn't pull or yell. He walked ahead in silence, looking at the horizon, not at her. Her wrists still wore the thin chains, but no one held the end of them anymore. She glanced around nervously, thinking someone might shout, "Stop, thief," or drag her back, but no one came. No one cared. She was no one's property, now at least. That's what the man had said. They reached a quiet alley near the city's edge. A broken pipe dripped water nearby. The man knelt beside it, filled a metal cup from his pack, and offered it to her. She stared at it, unsure if she should take it, if she drank without permission in the past. She was punished, but the man nodded, gently, silently encouraging her. Her hands shook as she took the cup. The water tasted like rust and dust. But she drank it like it was the best drink in the galaxy. The man watched without speaking. Then he opened a dry packet of food and placed half of it in her hands. Again, no commands, no threats, just quiet. Finally, she whispered, "Why? Why did you buy me?" The man looked at her for a moment. His voice was calm, low. "I didn't buy you." He said, "I freed you." The words confused her. "But you gave a coin." He gave a tired smile. "My last coin, yes, but not to own you, to release you." The girl stared at him, unable to understand. In her world, no one ever gave something without asking for something worse in return. He must want something. He must be hiding it. "You will use me later?" she asked, her voice small, broken, like the others did. His eyes darkened not with anger at her, but at what had been done to her. He looked away. "No, never. That's not who I am." She didn't believe him. How could she? She'd known only pain, tricks, and chains. She curled up against the wall, holding her arms close to her chest, preparing for the worst. But nothing happened. Instead, the man took off his worn jacket and placed it over her shoulders. Then he sat on the opposite side of the alley, leaned his back against the wall, and closed his eyes to rest. He didn't even ask her name or where she was from. She looked at the jacket still warm from his body, still carrying the scent of sand and metal. Slowly, her fingers gripped the fabric, pulling it tighter around her. For the first time in her life, someone had covered her, not exposed her, not used her. Morning came with a soft light, and the market sound started again in the distance. The man stood and stretched, then looked at her. "We have a long walk ahead. You can stay. Or come with me. I won't force you." Her voice came out like a whisper. "Where are you going?" "To the old mining outpost. No one lives there now. I fix things," he said. "It's quiet, safe. You'll be safe too, if you want." She didn't know why, but her legs moved. She followed. As they walked through the rocky plains outside the city, the man spoke again. "That coin. It was my last, but I didn't need it. Not anymore." She looked at him, then, "Why spend it? On me?" He paused, then answered quietly, "Because no one else would. And you deserved more than that cage." Tears welled in her eyes. She turned her face so he wouldn't see them. She didn't want to cry in front of him, but her heart felt like it was being touched after years of ice. Every step she took beside him made the chains around her wrists feel lighter. Not because they were gone, but because for once she didn't feel like a slave anymore. Not to him, not to anyone. The desert stretched endlessly ahead of them. Wind carried soft waves of dust across the ground. The man walked calmly, taking steady steps. His eyes scanned the horizon as if watching for danger or maybe just looking for a sign that they were going the right way. The girl followed him, a few steps behind. Her bare feet hurt. But she didn't complain. She was used to pain, but not used to this silence, this freedom, this calm. Her chains still rattled when she walked, thin and light now, more symbol than prison. But he had not removed them, nor tightened them. They hung loose at her wrists like forgotten ropes, and yet she didn't feel afraid of him, not like she had with the others. He finally stopped under a jagged stone formation. He took off his bag, pulled out a folded tarp, and laid it across the smoothest rock. "We'll rest here for now," he said. Simply, she nodded, unsure if she should sit, stand, or keep her distance. She chose the ground near a small shadow, curling her legs to her chest. The jacket he had given her still hung on her shoulders, a little too big, a little too warm, but comforting. The man didn't say much. He fixed a small solar cooker and started heating something in a metal pot. She could smell its simple broth, but real food. He looked at her quietly, not judging, not rushing, just observing. "You haven't spoken much," he finally said. She looked down. "I don't know what to say," she replied honestly. He nodded. "That's okay. Silence is better than lies." His words were soft, and they felt heavy at the same time. She wondered what he had lost. What had broken him enough to make him spend his last coin on someone like her? He handed her the warm bowl. She hesitated again, then took it carefully. She sipped the broth, burned a little, but it was the first warm thing in her belly in many cycles. She watched him eat slowly, without greed, like someone who had gone hungry before and respected every bite. "Do you fix machines?" she asked suddenly, breaking her own silence. He looked at her, surprised, then nodded. "Mostly old mining bots, some power cores, scrap work, keeps me alive. Why help me?" She asked again, softer now. "You could have spent that coin on food, or repair parts, or left the city without a burden." He stared at the setting sun before answering. "Because I was tired of watching people walk past suffering like it's nothing. I couldn't fix everything, but I could fix one thing." She blinked, confused. "Fix me?" "No," he said. "You're not broken, just hurt. That's different." Her heart jumped at those words. No one had ever said that before, not even in kindness, in their eyes. She was always just a broken toy, ever a person worth healing. That night, as the stars appeared above them, she didn't sleep much. She listened to the wind, the soft breathing of the man nearby, and her own thoughts. When morning came, she found him sitting near the edge of the rock, checking a map on a flickering hollow tablet. She walked to him slowly and sat beside him without asking. He looked at her but said nothing. She looked down at her wrists, then looked up at him. "Can you remove these?" He nodded, pulled out a small tool, and gently unlocked the cuffs. The metal fell to the sand with a soft clink. She rubbed her wrists, feeling strange without them. They had been part of her for so long. It felt like losing a piece of her skin. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. I don't remember. They called me different things. None were real." He nodded again. "Then pick a new one you like, one that belongs to you." She stared at him, stunned. I can choose." "Yes," he said. "You're free. Freedom means choosing who you are." Tears rose in her eyes again. She turned her face away, trying not to cry. But the wind carried her sniffles anyway, and the man didn't move, didn't speak. Just sat beside her in silence, letting her cry without shame. Letting her feel maybe for the first time in her life that she was not alone. The sun had started to rise, painting the sand in shades of gold and pink. The girl sat quietly beside the man, her fingers drawing circles in the dust. Her wrists still carried the marks of the chains, even though the metal was gone. Her eyes, once empty, now blinked with thought. Slow but alive, the man packed his things in silence, rolling up the tarp, folding the blanket he had given her. He didn't ask anything, didn't rush her. He simply waited, giving her space to speak when she was ready. She looked up at him, her voice unsure. "Do you really want me to? Choose a name." He turned to her, his gaze steady and kind. "Yes, a name is yours, not something given by a cage or a collar." She thought for a long time. Her old names, they weren't names, just labels, numbers, things shouted at her in anger. But now this was hers to choose. "I don't know what name sounds like me," she said slowly. The man smiled. "Then start with something that feels warm inside you, something that sounds like freedom." She hesitated, then whispered, "Lena." It was the name I used in a dream once, before I forgot how to dream. Lena, the man repeated. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. It suits you. Tears welled up in her eyes. That was the first time someone had said her name without anger, without mocking. She hugged her knees, trying to hold in the emotion. The man didn't move closer, didn't touch her, but his presence was calm, safe, and strong, like a quiet shelter in the middle of a violent storm. They began walking again, heading toward the mountains where the old mining outpost waited. The desert stretched on endlessly, but Lena no longer feared it. Not when she had a name. Not when someone saw her as a person. As they walked, Lena began to notice things she had ignored before. The wind through the cracked rocks, the tiny lizards running over the sand. The way the man always looked for the safest path, always letting her walk in the shade when possible. "You don't talk much," she said gently, looking at him from the side. He gave a small smile. "Words are easy to break. It's what you do that matters." Lena thought about that. She had met many who used words sweet. Fake words to trap her, to hurt her. But this man had done something rare. He had done the right thing, even when no one was watching, even when he had nothing to gain. Later that day, they stopped by an old rest station, long abandoned and half covered in sand. Inside was an empty storage room and some broken crates. The man checked everything for danger first, then allowed her inside. He handed her a small mirror, cracked, dusty, but still useful, if you want, he said. "You can look at yourself now, not because you have to, but because it's your face, your body, your life." She stared at the mirror for a long time. Her reflection didn't look like the girl in her dreams. Her face was thin, her eyes tired. Her skin had bruises that hadn't fully healed, but it was hers. "I never had a mirror before," she said softly. "Slaves didn't need them. Free people do," the man replied, "so they can see how strong they are." She placed the mirror down, carefully, almost like it was sacred. Then she asked, "What's your name?" He blinked, surprised, then rubbed his beard. "People used to call me Rick." "Rick," she repeated, testing the sound. "Why did you stop using it?" He looked away. "Because I lost people I cared about. After that, the name didn't feel like mine anymore." Lena tilted her head. "Then maybe it's time for you to take it back." Rick looked at her, and for the first time, his expression changed, not just calm, but full of something deeper. Healing. Maybe she wasn't the only one trying to remember how to be human again. That night, as they sat near the station, sharing a small fire made from old scraps, Rick looked at her and said, "Good night, Lena." And she smiled, a real smile. One that didn't hurt, one that came from her heart. "Good night, Rick." Two broken souls. No longer silent strangers, just a man and a girl, no chains. No cages, only names, and the beginning of something new. The path to the old mining outpost grew steeper. Rocky hills replaced the wide desert, and broken machines rusted along the trail like dead animals. Lena followed Rick closely, her steps careful on the uneven ground. She didn't speak much, but her eyes were open, watching, learning, remembering what it meant to live without fear. By now, her body had begun to change. She stood straighter, walked with more balance. Her ribs still showed through her skin, but her face wasn't as hollow. The food Rick shared with her gave strength not just to her body, but to her soul. They camped beside a broken transport shell, old and covered in moss. It shielded them from the cold wind that night. Rick started a small fire using leftover wires and solar heat. Then, without saying anything, he handed her half of the rations. She accepted it with a quiet thank you, and he only nodded, like always. Just as she was about to rest, she heard a noise, soft footsteps, too soft to be Rick's. Her eyes widened. She turned and whispered, "Someone's coming." Rick's eyes snapped to attention. He stood up silently, his hand on the tool-turned weapon he carried. 3 figures appeared from the shadows, rough-looking aliens with sharp teeth and cracked armor. One of them grinned, didn't expect to see a human out here with such company. Lena froze, memories of the slave pits flooding back into her mind like poison. The men's eyes didn't look at her like Rick's eyes did. These eyes wanted to claim her, hurt her, sell her again. Step back, Rick told her. Calmly, not looking away from the intruders, Lena obeyed, even though her legs shook. The lead alien pulled out a rusted blade. That girl belonged to someone. Friend, you have no papers, no rights. She's just a runaway slave and we get paid for runaways. She's free, Rick said, voice firm. She walks with me by choice. Choice. The alien laughed. Slaves don't get choice. Before the alien could finish another sentence, Rick moved. He stepped forward like a storm, slamming the weapon across the alien's face with brutal speed. One blow, then another. The second. Alien charged and caught Rick's shoulder with a deep cut, blood running down his arm. Lena screamed, her hands reaching out before she could stop herself. But Rick didn't fall. He roared and drove his fist into the attacker's jaw. Cracking bone, the third one ran, dragging the first behind him, afraid of what the silent human had become. Rick stood there, breathing heavily, blood soaking through his shirt. His weapon slipped from his hand, and he dropped to one knee, pain tightening his jaw. Lena rushed forward, tears already falling from her eyes. You're hurt. You're hurt. All right, he muttered, wincing. Just a cut. She helped him sit, pulling cloth from the pack and wrapping it around his shoulder. Her hands moved fast, but her touch was gentle. Careful, she wasn't used to caring for anyone. No one ever let her, but she wanted to. Now, you didn't have to fight them, she said, voice breaking. You could have. You could have let them take me? Rick looked at her, eyes full of fire. No, I couldn't. He said, no one takes you again. Not while I'm still breathing. Those words melted something inside her, deeper than any wound, deeper than any chain. She leaned forward slowly, pressing her forehead against his shoulder, letting silent tears fall onto the cloth she had wrapped. I thought pain was the only thing I'd ever feel, she whispered. But now I feel something else. Because of you. Rick didn't speak. He simply placed his hand gently over hers, not to claim her, not to control hers, to say, I'm here. That night, Lena stayed awake beside him, watching his face as he rested. His breath was slow but strong. His blood had dried, but his body was tired. Even so, she had never felt safer than at that moment. For the first time, Lena believed in something again. Not in fate, or hope, or dreams, but in him. By the time they reached the edge of the mining outpost, Rick's shoulder was healing. But slowly, the blood had stopped. The pain was less now. But Lena stayed close, always checking, always watching him with quiet eyes that were no longer empty. The outpost was hidden behind a wall of rock-holed mining tunnels. Forgotten by time, machines were scattered across the sandy cliffs like giant skeletons. Their metal rusted, their purpose lost, but the place felt peaceful in its silence, like it had been waiting for someone to return. Rick stopped near a half-buried metal dome with broken lights and solar panels. He tapped a small code into a panel near the door, and with a soft hiss, it slid open, revealing the inside dusty. Old, but safe. This is home, he said simply. Lena stepped inside carefully. Her bare feet touched the cold floor, and she shivered not from fear, but from the strange feeling of being inside something that wasn't a cage. The room had a simple bed, a water purifier, some tools on the wall, and shelves stacked with parts, wires, and scrap. There were no chains, no collars, no control pads, just walls, just space freedom. Rick motioned toward a folded mattress in the corner. You can sleep there. I'll fix it up later. She nodded slowly, still unsure if she was dreaming. It's quiet here, she said, her voice soft like the wind outside. He smiled faintly. That's why I came, after the war. Quiet was the only thing that didn't hurt. Lena sat on the edge of the mattress. Brushing away dust with her hands, she looked up at him, watching how he moved carefully. Like someone who had been alone for too long and was still learning how to be near another person again. Rick walked to the water purifier and poured 2 cups. He handed one to her without speaking. And they sat for a while, drinking in silence. Are you really okay with me being here? She asked suddenly. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, he said immediately. You were never the burden. What was done to you was the real crime, you being here. It's your choice, not mine. She looked down at the cup in her hands, her fingers trembling just a little. No one's ever given me a choice before, not even once. Rick leaned back against the wall, looking tired but calm. Then, it's time you start making them. This place isn't a prison, Lena. You're not trapped here. You can leave any time or stay. You don't owe me anything. His words struck her harder than any blow ever had. She didn't owe him yet, she wanted to stay, not because she had to, but because for the first time she wanted to. That night, she helped him cook a small meal from the emergency packs. She had never cooked before, but Rick showed her how, patient and gentle, and when they sat together to eat, she laughed quietly, carefully, but it was real laugh, full of surprise. Rick looked at her, surprised himself. You laughed, he said, like it was the rarest sound in the world. She covered her mouth, blushing. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't be, he said, smiling. It suits you. After dinner, Lena explored the small outpost. Each corner had a purpose-stool scrap, a space where Rick worked on old machines. But there was also something else, something small, personal on a shelf sat a photo frame, cracked but still standing. Inside was a faded picture Rick, younger, smiling beside a woman and a child. Lena stopped, her hand hovering over the photo. They were your family, she asked quietly. Rick walked over slowly, his eyes on the photo. My wife and daughter. Before everything burned, she didn't ask more. She didn't need to. His pain lived in his silence. I'm sorry, she whispered. Rick nodded. Me too. They stood there for a long moment. 2 souls shaped by loss, pain, and choices no one else saw. But now they had something that wasn't broken. Something real. Before going to bed, Lena folded the old blanket he had given her, placed it neatly on her mattress, then looked around the room once more. Her voice was soft but steady. This doesn't feel like a cage. Rick turned from his tools and met her gaze. Because it's not. It's a home, if you want it to be. And she nodded slowly, placing her hand over her chest, where the pain used to live. But now there was something else growing there. Something new, something hers, a place she could call home. The stars above the outpost were brighter than anywhere Lena had ever seen. They looked like thousands of tiny lights stitched into a dark blanket. Peaceful and quiet. The air was cold, but not sharp like the cities. It felt clean, gentle even. Kind Lena sat outside the outpost on a flat rock, wrapped in the worn jacket Rick had given her. Her feet dangled above the soft dust, and her eyes were fixed on the sky, somewhere behind her. Rick was finishing repairs on an old solar collector, sparks dancing softly from his tools. She closed her eyes and listened, not for danger, not for footsteps, but for the sound of peace. And she heard it, a silence that wasn't empty, but full. Her hands touched her chest, where her heart beat slow and steady. Lena, she whispered to herself. It still felt new, still strange, but it belonged to her now, just like this place, this home. It wasn't a cage, and Rick wasn't a master. He was something else entirely. Rick walked up beside her quietly, Holding 2 steaming cups of broth, he handed one to her and sat next to her on the rock. "You always sit out here at night," he said. She nodded. "It feels like the stars aren't watching me. They're waiting for me." He smiled a little at that. Maybe they are. They sat together in silence, drinking, watching the stars, breathing the stillness. Then she spoke, her voice soft, unsure. "Do you miss them?" Rick turned his head slowly. Every day she looked down. "Do you? Think about them when you look at me." He blinked, surprised. "No," he said. "When I look at you, I don't see who I lost. I see someone who chose to live." Her throat tightened, "Even when I was a slave." "You were never a slave in your heart," he replied gently. "That part of you survived, even when they tried to break it." Tears slipped from her eyes again, but she didn't hide them, not this time. Rick didn't look away either. He just let the moment stay. Let the pain speak without words. After a while, she wiped her tears and laughed quietly. "I'm always crying around you, and I'm always proud of you when you do," he said. "It means you're still alive." Still feeling, she looked up at the sky again, then back at him. "Rick, I want to stay. Not just tonight or this week. I want this place, this life. With you." His breath caught for a second, but he didn't hide it. His fingers tightened slightly on his cup. "Lena, I wanted to ask you something too." She tilted her head, eyes curious, nervous. "What?" He placed the cup down, reached into his pack, and pulled out something small, an old ring. Plain metal, a little scratched but carefully polished. "I kept this," he said. "Not because I couldn't let go of the past, but because I hoped one day might mean something." Again, her eyes widened, lips parting in shock. "You?" He held the ring in his palm. "You're free, Lena. You've always been free with me, and I would never ask this unless I knew it was truly your choice. But if you want, if you feel it too, I'd be honored if you stayed not just in my home but in my heart, as my wife, for a second." She couldn't breathe. Her mind froze. Her heart beat loud in her chest. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. No one had ever looked at her like a person, like a woman with a future, and here he was, the man who spent his last coin not to own her but to set her free, now asking not for her body, but for her heart. She dropped her cup and grabbed his hand with both of hers. Her tears falling again, but this time they were full of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, Rick, I want to stay. I want to be your wife." He gently placed the ring on her finger, and it fit not perfectly, but just enough to feel right. She looked at it as if it was the most precious thing in the universe. That night, under the galaxy's light, a broken girl and a lonely man made a promise, not bound by chains, not written by blood, but chosen by love, together. They didn't just survive, they began again.